This is the Infrastructure Matters podcast, brought to you by the Futurum Group. We explore the latest developments in hybrid cloud computing and the technology that underpins it. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the latest trends and technologies that are shaping the hybrid cloud computing landscape. The Infrastructure Matters podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Please do not take anything reflected in this show as investment advice. Now your co-hosts, Stephen Dickens, Camberley Bates, and Krista Macomber of the Futurum Group.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Infrastructure Matters. My name's Stephen Dickens and I'm joined this week by Krista Macomber and Camberley Bates. Welcome to the show.
Good to be back.
It is. We've kind of missed you, Camberley. You've just not been in the last few. It's just not been the same without you.
You know, I was taking a European vacation. I was gone for almost 3 weeks. So there you go.
You look glowing and refreshed and re-energized.
All right. Tell us all the cycling photos. It looks like you had a wonderful time.
Yeah. Now we're back into technology. There we go.
Yeah.
And it's conference season. We're all back today after a week on the road. You guys have been out to NetApp. I've been to Lenovo Tech World. So let's dive straight in. NetApp, you were both there. Big show, big vendor. Tell us a little bit about what you heard and what the takeaways were.
So we had both at the NetApp event. It was not only just the conference, but they also had an AR event that was start before the entire conference did. So we had the opportunity in a small group environment to be with all the executives presenting. So and let me give you the kind of the big themes with George Kurian brought to both to the AR, and he kind of expanded a bit more than he did on the main stage, but he had big statement, disruption is an opportunity for all. And that is the kind of a statement they used all the way through. And where that's referring to is probably the two areas that we're all seeing. One is the disruption of AI, which is opportunity. It's also disruption. The other one was the data security stuff, which Krista will pick up a little bit later. This is all disruption, the cyber resiliency, cyber security, all that kind of stuff is hugely disruptive. The third area, which is not as much disruptive, that he's bringing, third theme that he had that was part of all of that is talking about, he talked about unified storage, but really what he's talking about is another theme that they had, which is intelligent data infrastructure. So you're having to take the big themes and bringing it down to, what is NetApp rolling out? How are they supporting the disruption that we're feeling across the board? So on the AI, and what I really loved about what George had to say was he really does it's really clear they understand what's going on in the data center. I mean, I think they're very well aligned as an executive staff on what's happening. And that's, will trickle down into the organization as well as the delivery of the products, et cetera. So from an AI standpoint, he cites understanding, it is not just about the technology. It's about the organizational connections between IT, data services, the business units that all have to come together to bring out solutions. And of course, they're focusing on the data pipeline. And that's the second piece that he talks about, which is how do you treat data as a product? Data is a product. And we've talked about that a lot for the last 10 years. They have definitely, because they talked about data fabric and everything and stuff, but it's really dealing with the creation of data, the management of it, the data fragmentation that we're facing, that we're hearing pop up from all over the place, and then the overall data strategy and having a core data strategy. This is something, and I know I'm talking a lot here, that we saw early on with the CIOs as a priority coming into this year is, I need usable data. The data, just because the data is there does not mean it's necessarily usable, and I have to address usability of it. So the last piece is, so that gets into needing a modern data architecture and what NetApp can do to creating usable data. And that has to do with how do you look at, and we'll get into the subject later on, this data that's scattered everywhere, managed in the cloud, on-prem, different geographies, etc. How do you manage that? How do you manage different data types, whether it's block, file, object? And then operationally, because it costs a lot to manage these things. And so those are the big themes coming out of the George stuff. And I can get into the technology. We have a note coming out that will talk about the key announcements that they have that you check out. But those are the kind of things that they're trying to talk about with their clients, and then the solutions that they're bringing in terms of how do you do this from an overall ubiquitous space and managing all those areas. So with that, I will shut up and pass it on to one of my other cohorts here, Krista, to talk about these.
The heartwarming thing for me was seeing the Korean brothers on stage together. I don't know what that was like in the room, but having a brother of my own, just that must be so great to have your brother come on and from. So maybe talk about the reaction to that, because I'd imagine that was kind of well done in the room.
Right, and the good news is that you can tell them apart.
Okay.
Yes.
It used to be you couldn't tell them apart as much because one's got long hair, that would be Thomas, and George has got his hair shaved down much more short, so you know who each one is.
Are they twins or are they just brothers?
They are twins. Yeah, they're twins.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying you can tell them apart a little bit easier than you used to be able to.
Yeah.
So the big announcement that happened earlier in September was the Google announcement for their ONTAP, which is Google Cloud Volumes now. I think it's what it's called. That's on Google, and it's a first-party offering, meaning that Google sells this. It's not part of the marketplace. It's not part of whatever. And what first-party really means here, and I don't think NetApp does the best job of explaining what first party really means. It's not only that it's easier to provision and that you got a single bill and that Google is selling it, but the other piece of it is that the development is joint. We have Google developing, you have NetApp developing jointly, and as they roll this out, it's more available from a worldwide basis. You also have a huge focus on the security on this. So when Google rolls something that has to do with security, you're going to know that this is part of Google's security as well that's being applied to it.
Well, that's probably a place to bring.
That's a huge thing. They don't emphasize it enough, either from AWS or Azure or that kind of stuff. That's a big issue.
That's probably an area to bring you in, Krista, on sort of what was your takeaways from the show? I mean, the security piece is something where you kind of focus for us, but what were your key takeaways?
Yeah. So we had obviously this NetApp Insight event, and we also had we attended back in June their dedicated analyst summit. And at both events, I had the pleasure to spend some time with their data services team, which is a new team that NetApp formed. I believe it was earlier this year, if not, it was late last year. So it's a relatively new team. But effectively, what this team is charged with doing is both driving the development of NetApp's data services and also kind of better conveying to the market some of these capabilities that are built in intrinsically to ONTAP, which is NetApp's operating system. And of course, security is a very big component of that. So specifically, we've had conversations with them this week about, cyber resiliency and ransomware recovery. So that you have what they call an autonomous ransomware protection capability, which is effectively the ability to identify that an attack has occurred based on either malware signatures or based on the identification of anomalous user activity, and then be able to, using BlueXP, which is NetApp's kind of cloud-based control plane, take a snapshot, and then automatically kind of identify which might be the last known good snapshot. So kind of really expedite that ability for customers to be able to respond to attacks and to recover from them. So it's what I thought was really interesting was the VP of that team, Gagan Gulati, he actually told us in a meeting that this capability is actually the fastest adopted feature within ONTAP that they've seen. So I thought that was really telling in terms of not only the work that NetApp's doing, but also just the recognition in the market that this is something that really needs to kind of be built in intrinsically into the storage itself. And as someone that typically covers, data protection and backup, it's certainly we need kind of that comprehensive strategy that spans the spectrum. But ideally, if we can kind of stop these attacks before they even impact the backup environment, of course, that's only going to be that's only going to be good in terms of reducing the amount of data loss we have and, ideally the amount of downtime that a business has coming out of an attack.
The demo they did was pretty slick. I mean, showing that what they showed was an attack happening and the system immediately taking a snapshot and then they showed the recovery of coming back. And when she went back and, grabbed another snapshot back and restored that, they had, a few files, maybe 4 files or something that they had to go back even farther to pick up because it got mucked up but this instant system detecting something, snapshotting, et cetera. And they've done a lot of training with AI. They made a huge claim. Harv did. I asked him to prove it and that kind of stuff, and he, how he's going to prove it, but it's got a 99% detection rate. Now I'm like going, really? But anyway, that's what he was claiming. So.
It kills 99% of germs. Well, with right. Germs, yeah. Well, I mean, I think with all those claims, the legal department gets involved, having made claims as a product manager in the past and knowing the process. There's probably an asterisk somewhere and a 3 pages worth of notes in 6-point font that kind of backs it up. So maybe we need to pour through that and take a look. So my week, I was at a Tech World, which was Lenovo's big, well, not kind of as big as it should be. I was just debriefing with one of their AR team. Lenovo could do a bigger job of this. Stellar cast on the keynote. YY, their chairman and CEO. We had Lisa Su from AMD on stage. We had Jensen rocking his leather jacket as always from NVIDIA. I think he's probably been to every keynote there's been. Maybe I don't know. Did he jump on a plane and manage to make it to NetApp? But I don't think he's missed many. But they did a fantastic job of talking about what they're doing about AI. And for Lenovo, it's kind of the whole messaging is what they're talking about as pocket to cloud. Not a lot of people kind of remember that Lenovo owns Motorola, so it's everything from your genuinely your pocket and the device. And they showed some devices on stage powered by AI, right through to edge devices, a huge portfolio of kind of edge compute devices, right through to the work they're doing with hyperscalers in the public cloud. Yeah, so fantastic overview from Lenovo. As I say, everything from kind of Motorola on device, turning on sort of airplane mode, on device, large language models, right through to computer vision use cases for manufacturing in the edge, right through to kind of private large language models in enterprise deployments, some of the work they're doing with NVIDIA and AMD in that space. So kind of there's a research note that Dave Raffo and I have put together that I'll put in the show notes, but fantastic kind of end-to-end portfolio from Lenovo. A lot of people have them kind of paint. The other piece that came through, and I'm not a devices guy, was the AI PC. So how are we going to be able to use this technology on our devices? How are they going to optimize devices for AI? It's going to be pervasive across all of the applications that we use. But how do we build a PC infrastructure that's built for that. You know, so whether that's collaboration with people like AMD from a processor point of view, kind of fascinating overview from the Lenovo team, trying to fit, as I say, everything from you ladies would have loved the phone that they showed, turning your phone into a bracelet, a bendable phone. So just literally, being able to wrap the phone around everything from that
The
through.
smartwatches weren't enough.
I know, right? The lady who did that did a fantastic demo, literally taking a smartphone and bending it and wrapping it around your wrist, which I thought was kind of cool.
Does it have diamonds on it?
I'm sure for you, Camberley, they do a one you need.
I was gonna bring my hand up.
Diamante encrusted. I'll talk to the product manager and get you one. How does that sound?
Thank you.
As a
Appreciate it.
demo unit. But no, I mean, literally trying to fit all of that breadth into 2 hours. The team did a great job. We had Cristiano Amon, we had from Qualcomm, we had Pat Gelsinger from Intel, Satya Nadella, all record segments for the keynote as well. So it was pretty stellar lineup. So fantastic event. So you'll see some coverage from us on that. So.
And Stephen, I know we talked a little bit last week about what Lenovo's doing around storage. Now, was there any conversation around kind of data and kind of getting data to these devices, especially if we're talking about, AI and large language, models and things like that?
It was fascinating. They gave us opportunity to spend some time with YY, who's there. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his full name. They all call him YY. The CEO. So he did a briefing for about 40 of us. And I got to ask him the question, and his interesting answer. I asked it, I represented for you two from a storage point of view, and asked him a question about how they get up the tiers into enterprise storage. He brought up the subject of M&A activity. So obviously didn't go much further than that, but I think his exact comments were along the lines of, we've done a lot of acquisition activity in the past, and it's something we'd look at proactively. So interesting to see whether Lenovo, who are now, I think, number one in storage price tiers 1 through 3.
Yeah, from below $25,000, their entry level.
They're moving up the stack. I think they're number 4 in storage or 3 in storage. Number three. This is why we have you on the show, Camberley, to keep me honest. But number 3 in storage overall. They need to move up the tiers, and it was interesting to see what YRI's reaction was to that.
So one of the things that I didn't realize this week, that what is all now into the IDC's tracker, which is what you're citing, the number 3 one. In there is not only the storage devices, but it's also HCI, and it's also software defined. Numbers are all in there. So they're pushing a lot of HCI stuff. So I'm assuming that that's kind of what one of the pieces that's helped them move up the ladder from number 4 to number 3, which is they just jumped up to the next level. So it's how do they maintain that kind of position? Yeah,
they're high performance computing environment. I'd need to get the exact data, but the 500 largest systems, that they lead that market as well. So, they're really investing in some of those enterprise deployments. So I think, personally, from my 2 weeks with Lenovo, the last 2 weeks, I'm starting to recalibrate on those guys for sure.
So they brainwashed you now? Is that what you said?
I know.
With them?
I've been brainwashed. I need some perspective. I'm with them again next week, getting a deep dive on TrueScale. So maybe I need some perspective and some other vendors to brief me. There's an open invitation if you're listening, GAR teams. The other thing, big news for this week, was AWS, Google, and Microsoft all announcing earnings in the same week. And I love that they all come in the same week because it gives you fantastic comparative. And just to give the numbers before we dive into a discussion, AWS 12% growth for the third quarter. Google and Microsoft, respectively. Google was 22.5%. Microsoft Azure, 29% growth. And these are off massive numbers. These aren't small numbers. They're off huge numbers. I think AWS has got some work to do from AI. Obviously with Anthropic and some of the investments they're making. But no, I'd love to get your perspective.
I believe still, and I have not sat down and gone through the earnings transcripts, but a lot of this is being driven by the AI development that's going on, like we're expecting from other people. And that some of the absorption of the technology has happened over this last 9 months. So we're starting to go back into the cadence of the pieces of it. So it'll be interesting. And also the IBM had very good earnings this week too.
Mainframe business up 9% in a bad part of the cycle was my highlight from that.
Which is huge. And then seeing, the consulting services and the software elements also picking up. So we're going to, we're getting into got some more earnings coming out. It's kind of watching it very carefully because we saw this huge bump last quarter because of AI. Are we going to get another one of that as the market is still hesitant about what is happening? There's still conservative spending going on, which I think is a good thing because Powell is not necessarily bullish on everything right now, Chairman Powell. So I think that's all, goodness for us as being here we go. Sorry, guys, I actually have a phone here. I didn't turn it off. So anyway, I'll stop there.
I mean, we didn't put it in the prep here, but the IBM earnings was fascinating for me. I think good to see that business overall returning back to growth and consistent growth. I think they're a lot slicker, more focused, more on message post Kyndryl. What's that, 15 months ago now? I think that level of focus is starting to come through for me around AI hybrid cloud. They've got a very clear mission, and Arvind's doing a great job over there, I think.
Right, and their latest announcement this week was the Code Assist, Watson X Code Assist, which is huge, because that's one of the biggest areas that we're seeing, the current uptick in AI, generative AI is, how do you take that to the Code Assist? We heard that from NetApp, what they're doing with it. I mean, they did talk about some of the areas that they're investing in. And one of them was in testing, taking the code that they had and all the test beds that they had and regenerating it into current code, the Python code, and how you can completely, massively streamline your testing. And that means I can get products out faster. Because that's usually that's one of the biggest poles in the tent, especially the bigger the company, the more they have to test all the corner cases. And it's a very difficult, long, laborious process. So that's pretty cool to see, the Watson X stuff, Code Assist.
I think IBM's got the brand permission to be a key player that vendors and enterprises call as they start to embark on an AI sort of deployment. They've been at it for so long with Big Blue, with the Jeopardy stuff they did. They've been at this for a while.
So my question is, can I take, and I haven't read it through enough, can I do the assembler? Can I take assembler? Because we still have assembler code out there and move that into modern code, and will it be as efficient, et cetera? So I'm sure IBM Research is working on that.
So I spoke to the AR team. They're setting me up a call with the mainframe team about Watson X. So okay. I'll either invite you to that, or I'll ask that question for you. How does that sound?
And we'll talk about it at a later show so our visitors can know it. So
there we go.
Do we want to go on to? We've only got a little bit left here, so we have another topic. What's our?
Yeah, so this is the deep dive. This is the deep dive. So obviously, with me being out at Lenovo, you ladies being out at NetApp this week, deep dive topic for this week is around data in a hybrid cloud. I'll maybe go to you, Krista, because you've not maybe been as vocal this morning. Camberley's been hogging the sort of limelight. But no, I mean, I know. So maybe just get us kicked off. We're starting to see this whole data layer emerge. It's getting critical from an AI perspective. What are you seeing, and what's your perspective?
Yeah. So I think a lot of what I've been kind of focused on lately has obviously been related to kind of protection and security
Mhm.
of data, which I think when we think about it in the context of AI, not necessarily anything special there, just that, we need to kind of continue to make sure that we're doing all of our best practices, which is not easy, considering the fact that data is sprawling right across these hybrid cloud environments. Multi-cloud is a real thing. Um, we're hearing that from a customer perspective in the
Mhm.
conversations that we're having, and we're also seeing that from a vendor side. So, obviously we touched on a few events. One we haven't yet touched on that also occurred this week was Veeam had a virtual cyber resiliency summit to kind of talk about some new announcements that they have coming out of the 12.1 release of Veeam backup and replication. And I bring that one up because they introduced what they call the Threat Center. And so, really, what that is looking to do is not only to kind of have some of these ML, AI capabilities that we've seen to be able to uncover attacks by looking at, entropy changes and things like that, but also kind of give customers a bigger picture context into how their threat landscape works. We also saw at this summit that Veeam, like a number of their other kind of counterparts in the data protection space, they're closely integrating with ServiceNow, and also from an API perspective, really just any SIEM tool that customers might be using. And so that also kind of gives that bigger picture context across the environment to be able to better identify which is the best restore point, to better have, forensic analysis post attack and things like that. So I bring this up because it's a similar message that we saw NetApp have from the standpoint of kind of that common data services layer.
Mhm.
And I think the more we can kind of have that layer, but also have some of this visibility, is really important when we think about having that resiliency against these cyber attacks. So again, not necessarily specific to AI, but certainly the more important data becomes with use cases like AI, this is going to be, I think, a big consideration for customers.
Yeah.
Well, and Krista, you talked about the NetApp discussion on data services, and that is a common theme for anybody that's building systems right now, is building that platform for data services.
I think it's interesting reflecting back to my sort of attendance at the Open Text event, so coming at it less from the sort of infrastructure point of view, but more from the data curation.
Yep.
You know, it was interesting. It came up again this week from Lenovo about sort of preparation of data and into a vector database to be able to sort of get that. So I think my perspective is the vendors are aware of the challenge from the data preparation, curation, kind of structuring, how they build it ready to be put forward for a large language model. I don't think any of them have got it nailed 100% yet. I had a chance to have a chat to Antonio Neri last Friday, and in a closed sort of room, there was sort of four analysts that we had managed to have a chance with for breakfast with him. The big thing for me is you can tell that all the CEOs are chatting to each other. Antonio's the CEO of HPE, if you don't know. They're all chatting to each other around this kind of data preparation, curation, structuring, kind of vectorizing of data. That's the big space that everybody's talking about large language models. Everybody's showing the demos. As we look to deploy this at an enterprise layer, it's going to be absolutely crucial.
Well, isn't the saying the AI is only as good as the data? Really, at the end of the day, is the data that it's fed.
Yeah, exactly. And as these enterprises look to deploy private large language models at scale based on enterprise data. Getting that data ready and presentable and structured is going to be the next big challenge.
So one of the demos that we saw at NetApp live demo on stage, most impressive, one very, very impressive, was with Google and Vertex, and showing provisioning a volume to Vertex and executing generative AI against that volume and producing a web page. And the entire process they went through it in terms of basically showing graphics and everything, basically a marketing person doing this. So once the volume's attached to Vertex, give me this information from this, give me this information. So it was internal data they had as well as website data or whatever. And it's worth a view, so.
Well, I think that's a fantastic place to wrap. I mean, it's crazy conference season. We're all on the road getting a raft of announcements. I think, there's been a lot of earnings to cover. We could probably go on for an hour on this show today, but we're trying to keep ourselves disciplined to keep us to half an hour. So you've been listening to Infrastructure Matters. Please click and subscribe and do all those things that we recommend. Click, subscribe, share with your friends. We're trying to build this show. So thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you next week.